Alvin, you have famously said that you don't need arguments for God, but maybe this is the scientist in me. I keep wanting to talk about arguments. I like arguments. Now, you have proposed some arguments that you believe can show God exists. What are some of these?
Uh, well, first of all, I'd like to reiterate, I don't think you need arguments. I think you can be perfectly sensible, rational, reasonable, justified, intellectually okay, meeting your responsibilities, etc., believing in God without believing on the basis of arguments, even if you don't think there are any good arguments. I think that's how actually most people do believe in God, and I think that's a perfectly proper way. But I do think there are arguments. I also believe, say, in other minds, in the basic way, without believing in the basis of arguments. But there is at least one argument that's historically been offered, the so-called analogical argument, which I think is a pretty weak argument, but still, the fact that you can believe in something properly without arguments doesn't mean there aren't any. And I think there are some. I think there are quite a few. I think there are at least a couple of dozen arguments that are pretty good arguments. Some are stronger than others, some are pretty weak, some are pretty strong, but there are quite a bunch of them. Among them would be, for example, metaphysical arguments, epistemological arguments, moral arguments, arguments from beauty, and then some others that don't really fit into any other category except other.
Describe briefly, say, metaphysical arguments. What are some of those?
Well, here's an interesting example of a metaphysical argument. It's an argument about sets. Mm-hmm. And a very common way to think about sets is like this, that there's a whole stratified structure of sets, so that at the bottom layer there are non-sets, just objects, whatever, numbers, for example, other objects. At the next level, sets of those things. At the next level, sets of the first two levels, at the next level, and so on. So there's a stratified hierarchy of sets, first. And then secondly, sets have their members essentially, so that a given set, let's say the unit set of Socrates, a set that got only Socrates in it, that could not have existed but not had Socrates as a member. It couldn't have been the null set, and it couldn't also instead have had you in it or me in it, or maybe all three of us, you and me and Socrates. It's got its members essentially. Now, the idea that goes along with that as to what a set is would be a collection, a collecting together on the part of a mind. So this is the way Cantor thought of it, the great set theorist, the inventor of modern set theory, Georg Cantor. A set is a matter of a mind collecting some things together, thinking these things in one thought. So I might look at my four fingers and think of them together in one thought. And thereby, that's what thereby is a set. But there are so many sets, and some of them are so complicated that they couldn't possibly be collections on the part of human beings, say the set of the natural numbers, or some very sort of diverse set of elements from the set of real numbers. No human being could think all those things together, have them before their minds at one time. So if sets really are collections and have to be collected in that fashion, there would have to be some supermind, something like God, in order to collect them.
So this is an example of a metaphysical kind of argument or an ontological being argument, things that exist. And that's certainly a category. You've listed a number of categories, metaphysical arguments, epistemological arguments, moral arguments, and then kind of a collection of others. How would you populate this? What are some other possibilities?
Well, the moral argument, a lot of people, I guess I would be among them, are very strongly inclined to think that if there weren't any such thing as God, you might say a divine lawgiver, then there really wouldn't be any such thing as moral obligation, genuine moral obligation. It's being the case that you really ought to do something or else really ought not to do that thing. There wouldn't be any such thing if there weren't such a person as God. But clearly there is moral obligation, so I would say anyway, and so lots of people would think. So if you think those two things, then you've got another argument for the existence of God.
What about epistemological kinds of arguments?
Well, now, the way, I'll have to back up a little bit.
Yeah.
So think about what knowledge is. I would say we could use the term warrant to denote whatever it is that when you add it to true belief, the result is knowledge. So warrant is that property or quality, enough of which is what distinguishes a lucky guess, a mere true belief, from knowledge. Well, what is warrant? I guess the way I'm inclined to think of it, a belief has warrant for me provided it's produced by cognitive faculties, memory, perception, induction, and the like, that are functioning properly, not subject to any dysfunction or malfunction, in the sort of environment for which they were designed by God or evolution, and according to a design plan that's successfully aimed at truth. So that's what warrant is. It's kind of a complicated idea. But what I'm interested in here just is a notion of proper function. I think proper function is essential to the idea of warrant. And I think proper function can't be explained in naturalistic terms. So there isn't any way in which you can say what it is for something to function properly. That is, there isn't any way in which you can say what it is for something like a human being or other organism to function properly in merely naturalistic terms. People have tried to give an explanation in terms of evolution, for example, so that you're functioning properly when you're functioning in a way which was adaptive for your ancestors or something. Well, I don't have the time here to explain why none of this works, but none of it works. The only way, the basic idea of proper function is that of something which is designed to work a certain way, and then it functions properly when it works that way. And as it seems to me, you can't give an explanation of proper function in naturalistic terms. You can only do it in terms of a creator or designer of human beings. So if there really is such a thing as proper function, and if there isn't any such thing as knowledge, at least so say I, then there also has to be a designer.
How about some interesting arguments you've used that talks about flavors and colors, the Mozart argument, some of the richness of our world. Do you think those are really demonstrations of God's existence?
I think it'd be much too strong to say that they are demonstrations, but the fact that human beings, the fact that, let's say, there are people like Mozart that can create beauty of absolutely stunning proportions, this seems to me to fit in much better in a theistic universe, in one which God is in control, God who is himself beautiful beyond compare, who appreciates beauty, who makes us able also to appreciate it, makes us able also to make beautiful things and the like. That fits in vastly better, our being like that, than, say, our being in a naturalistic universe where we just happen to come out this way because evolution crafted us in this fashion. I mean, from that point of view, it's hard to think that either morality or beauty are real, that there really is such a thing as morality, or that there really is such a thing as what's genuinely beautiful. But from a theistic perspective, all that makes perfect sense.
And colors and flavors, the diversity that we have to experience, is that it goes beyond the naturalistic evolution of these things?
I'm not so sure about colors and flavors. I think I'll just stick with the beauty, with the beauty and with right and wrong morality.